One of our empty seats. Good evening. Welcome to St. Clair County RESA and Blue Water College Access Network. My name is Rachel Vershave. I work here in our Education Services Department and with Blue Water College Access Network. And I would like to thank everybody who came tonight, and especially our panelists who are here to share their perspective and their journeys as professionals in their careers, and maybe see what kind of interesting new ideas you walk over with. So I think to start, we should do a little bit of our housekeeping. I think all of you learned on your way in that restrooms are outside either door. Please feel free to, any of your needs, please make sure you go ahead and step outside. We don't take offense if you need to use the restroom or whatever you're doing up there. We will save questions and answers till the end of the program to make sure you have a little bit of time to get some of those questions answered. And we always encourage people to stick around and network with our panelists. As you're thinking about pursuing your next steps after high school, one of the best resources you will have is that network of people who can connect you with more people and with more opportunities. Our scholarship drawing will be at the end of the evening as well. So we hope you have a really good evening. Another thing that we're doing, you may or may not have noticed, is we're starting to stream live on Facebook. We are doing that this evening, and you're always welcome to follow us on Facebook or Twitter at BWCAN, C-A-N. So, I guess without much further ado, we'll get started. So we're here tonight, of course, because we're some kind of interest in criminal justice. You must have some interest in protecting the American way, about the values of our society, of safety, of getting the bad guys, whatever it is. There's some kind of common connection here. And as you're exploring career options, and if you think you're somewhat interested in criminal justice, hopefully you'll be gleaning some new ideas from everybody who's here today. But there are so many career options. This is just a little list of some of the possibilities. And they range, of course, from federal, state, local, even private levels like security guards, detectives. So there are so many possible careers. We couldn't obviously fill this room with panelists who would give you an idea of all of them, but hopefully they'll have some really great tips for you and pique your curiosity a little bit more. So a couple of ways that you can be, as you're sifting through where are my interests in this, you could look at a few different parts of the criminal justice system, and you see a lot of these parts represented here tonight. You can look at law enforcement, the court system, and even corrections. Another way you could look at it is some of those broad career categories, like corrections, forensics, homeland security, law enforcement, and legal, which we definitely have here tonight as well. Speaking of legal, if any of you picked up any of the materials over here on your way in, there were a few Hot 50 careers in Michigan pamphlets. You'll notice that lawyers are one of our very high demand careers coming up in the next several years by the time you guys graduate college. And so that's something you might want to keep in mind too, that is an area that there will be jobs for sure. So some skills you might want to be thinking about, and of course they'll be talking a lot more about what kinds of skills and interests you might want to have. But some things you might want to think about, and as you listen, some careers might be heavier in some of these than others in some of these skills. But skills like communication, problem solving, sometimes physical fitness, especially some of the cop jobs, being physically fit is a requirement. Leadership, collaborative work ethic, being able to work with other people, and having a strong sense of integrity and altruism, really wanting to help other people, being a good old person. So sometimes you forget how important it is writing, for example, in a lot of criminal justice careers. Being a very good writer and be able to articulate very well is a strong skill. So as you listen, you'll probably notice there are different skills that each of these people have as you go along, and you might identify with. So we're going to meet everybody who's here. One thing that I noticed just reading through the bios, and you have those in your folder, is we don't just have criminal justice professionals here. We have lifelong learners who, they didn't just stop learning in high school or after a college degree. They are still not only learning, they are teaching their profession as well at colleges and different places. So it's very much interesting to see not only people who keep learning and learning, but then give back. and continue that as well. So we'll get started then. We'll just do a quick rundown of who is here, and then we'll get into a little bit more of hearing how you got there. So Mona Armstrong is our Senior Assistant Prosecuting Attorney. I get all these, there's a lot of words in here. In St. Clair County, so she's a pretty big deal.
I like it. Not a lot of other people think so.
Just in time for time.
And her husband, Todd Armstrong. He's a probation department supervisor with the Michigan Department of Corrections in St. Clair County. And Mr. Damon Baker is a forensic technician with the Detroit Police Department. It was a very interesting conversation over dinner.
It's totally normal for me to talk about that stuff.
Yeah, it might not be for everybody's stomach. Doug Jones to Damon's left, Chief Probation Officer for the 72nd District Court. Rhonda Foster, she's a freelance court reporter and is also with Hanson Renaissance Court Reporting and Video. She's at the very far end. And then next to her, so we didn't have a picture, she's a certified shorthand reporter and registered professional reporter. So welcome everybody to our panel. You may notice we have quite the diverse group with very diverse credentials, different pathways that got them to their positions, varying different types of education. So I guess one of the things I'd like to start with is maybe a little bit of your story, starting from when you were a kid. What was, you don't have to tell the whole thing, I mean, come on. But, you know, what were the things that got you to where you are now in your position? Where did your interests start? What education path did you take? And how did it get you here? So if you want to start, we'll just work on down the panel just to get a little bit of that idea of what in the world, what did that young whippersnapper start with?
Well, actually, I was born in a log cabin. No, I'm not going to go that far back. But when I was a student in middle school, elementary school, high school, I was really interested in history and government. I actually first thought that I wanted to be a teacher. And then I became more interested in government and history. And basically, when you talked about standing up for truth, justice, the American way, that really is kind of what got me interested in not only the law, but specifically wanting to be a prosecutor. I knew pretty early on that that's what I wanted to do. So what that required was a bachelor's degree. I went to Michigan State University, so it's okay that you're wearing a Michigan sweatshirt. And then I had my Juris doctorate. My law degree is from Wayne State University. So I took every opportunity. The one thing I will say is, like you mentioned, probably the best resource anyone can have to determine if you want to do a profession is to shadow someone in that profession. So I was very fortunate. I actually tried the defense side of things when I was in law school, and I didn't like it, and I knew that I was kind of directed the way I wanted to go. I actually initially thought I wanted to be a federal prosecutor. I wanted to work for the United States government. And so I did an internship through the U.S. Attorney's Office in Detroit when I was in law school. And I did internships through the Macomb County Prosecutor's Office. And I learned really quickly, I didn't want to be a federal prosecutor. I thought it was really boring. What they do is at a completely different pace from what state prosecutors do. They'll take one case, the boxes will fill up a room, and they'll work on that case for 5 years, and I don't have the attention span for that. So it really was a good, beneficial way to see what I was suited to. And when I came out of law school, I actually started as a law clerk for one of our circuit judges here in St. Clair County, and that provided a great opportunity just to watch people. If you're thinking about working in a courtroom, just come and sit in a courtroom and watch what goes on there. It's a lot different than what I think most people would assume about it. So I got to experience firsthand what works and what doesn't work in a courtroom, and was fortunate enough to get a position in the St. Clair County Prosecutor's Office about 23 years ago. And that's where I've been ever since.
Could you explain one little thing?
Sure.
Or maybe it's huge. Could you explain to everybody what a Juris Doctorate is?
Sure, absolutely. If you go to law school, the degree you get is a Juris Doctorate. It is a doctorate. Nobody refers to us as doctor, whatever it is. But in terms of your graduate level education, it is above a master's, so that helps.
So Todd, how did you get to where you are?
I started out in college here in St. Clair County at the community college, actually, and I was going to be a teacher too. That's what I thought I wanted to do. Within the first year, I decided it would be more interesting to go into criminal justice, so I transferred into the criminal justice program. I wanted to be a police officer. Transferred up to Ferris State University, and within my first year at Ferris, I had to take a vision test to be qualified to be a police officer, and my vision is such that I cannot be certified as a police officer in Michigan. And the advisor sat me down at Ferris and said, well, here's a whole list of options, kind of like the slide you had earlier. And it kind of surprised me because you always just think police officer, but okay, there's a lot of options. So I switched into a generalist program at Ferris. For criminal justice, it kind of gives you a background or preparation for all these other fields of criminal justice. Finished my degree there, and I worked some security jobs at first. Not the greatest, but got me some experience. And then I applied with the state of Michigan, and I started out as a corrections officer at the Macomb Correctional Facility down in New Haven as a corrections officer. Worked there for several months, finished the academy, and then I applied and was promoted to a probation officer in Wayne County. Worked for about 3 years in Wayne County as a probation officer, and then I was able to transfer up here to St. Clair County, and I've been here pretty much ever since. Became a supervisor about 10 years ago. Did a brief stay down in Macomb when I first promoted, but was able to transfer back up here. So kind of skipped over, but after my bachelor's degree, when I met Mona, her mother kind of was like, how come you're not getting a more degree? Why aren't you going back to school? So,
I did not make him go to law
no,
school.
her mother did. I tell my students that all the time too. But I went back to school to Wayne State and got my Juris Doctorate from Wayne State. And about 12 or 13 years ago, I started teaching at Baker, at St. Clair County Community College, and then at Baker, and now I teach for Ferris at the St. Clair County Community College campus. So I kind of went full circle and started teaching again, but it's part-time still. So that's how I got here.
Nice, you started in St. Clair County and
Yep,
you
right back here. I graduated from Yale High School. I saw the Yale sweatshirt.
Bulldogs.
Yep.
Doug, how about you?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me here tonight. It's laundry night at our house, so being here, and I didn't tell my wife. 10 minutes I'm walking out the door. She said, where are you going? I said, I got a thing tonight. So I didn't know that. I had to move laundry to Wednesday, so it's a blessing to be here. I have a path that probably very similar to Todd's. I had the desire to be a police officer. I grew up in a family. My uncle was a state trooper. I love the uniform. I love the image that he presented. But when I went to college and learned that, number one, the hours that police officers work are not really conducive to family life. And family life's a big thing in law enforcement. Divorce rates are high, alcoholism rates are high amongst police officers. It kind of started me thinking that maybe there's another way. So I followed. I'm a proud graduate of Port Huron High Big Red, and then I went to SC4 as Todd did. And I had this really dynamic instructor who was moving to Northern Michigan University to run their police academy. So I followed him on up there and started taking more and more criminal justice classes and started to look into probation. But essentially, my whole life I was a rule follower. I liked to demonstrate to people that, staying within the confines of the law is a good way to go. Even though I grew up in a neighborhood that was not necessarily always participating in law-abiding activity, I kind of went the other way, fortunately. So I took an interest, thought originally I wanted to do juvenile probation, then learning that juveniles are much more reactionary, make choices that aren't always thought out, and then in juvenile probation you deal with a lot of more family issues than just necessarily helping that individual. So I got into the court system. I started out as a community service director. It was a newly formed program. 31 years ago, we never had a thing such as community service. Now you hear it all the time. So we developed this program. I was fortunate enough to be the first one hired to kind of seek out places to do community service and have our offenders participate. Then I was promoted to probation officer and eventually became the chief of the department. So that is my story. I never intended to come back to St. Clair County, but I'll tell you what, there's no better place to live and work. The law enforcement community is very supportive. Everybody's a big team. The three of us know each other. When I redid my deck a couple of years ago, I recruited them to help me. So we work tight, hand in hand. Todd and I share a wall between us, and we share information all the time. So even though I'm district court dealing strictly with misdemeanors and he's circuit court dealing with felonies, there's cross cooperation. Very, very necessary.
All right, I'm Damon. My thing's probably gonna be a lot shorter because I've only been in the field for 2 years. My official title is forensic technician, but that's just Detroit's fancy word for saying I'm a crime scene investigator. When I first graduated high school, I wanted to be a writer and did that for about 5 years before I finally decided to go back to school. Just kind of fell into forensics because I've always really liked puzzles. I've liked, being a part of that and kind of trying to figure out stuff that nobody else can figure out. So I took an intro to forensics class, and the instructor, who ended up being my academic advisor at the time, she said something that always kind of stuck with me. She said it takes a special person to want to be an investigator when it comes to crime scenes and forensics, because you have to want to be the person that can use your voice to speak for people who've had their voices taken away. And that really struck with me, and after that I was in. I took every class they had, took fingerprints, firearms, DNA, chemistry, and I loved all of it. I graduated in 2014, got hired into Detroit as a civilian about 2 years ago. April 11th, 2016 I started, and I've been doing it ever since. I absolutely love it. I wouldn't change it for anything. My degree does allow me to work in the laboratory if I want to, so that's a possibility that's open for me, but at the moment, working crime scenes it's so much fun. If you can handle it, if you can do it, every day is different. My job is never the same thing, and it blows me away that I've gotten as lucky as I have to get to where I am now.
Cindy?
I am, my name is Cindy Child. First, I am a freelance court reporter, and a court reporter is a person who makes a verbatim record, not just in court, but anybody who wants a verbatim record. We do conventions and arbitrations and hearings and go to people's homes every once in a while and they take a statement. So that's what I do. When I was in high school, my first 2 years, I didn't know what I wanted to do. But even back then, I've been doing this 49 years, and even back then, they had court programs. And the name of the program was Verdict is Juris. And there was a court reporter there, not like Judge Judy. I don't think they have a court reporter, but I was very interested in it. And so even at age 15, even though I was just a sophomore in high school, I started to check it out. And a week after I graduated high school, I started court reporting school. And I worked at an insurance company for about 2 years while I was going to school, and then I got to be friends with one of my teachers, and he was telling me that they needed transcribers, because back then they didn't use the computer. It was way before the computer's time. So in the last year of my training, I started working for a court reporting company. And I was a transcriber, and then once I got my speed, I started being a court reporter. I absolutely love it. I tell people that if I had to make a decision all over again, it would be the same decision. It's an interesting job. You meet different people all the time. We have such a broad spectrum of different kind of cases, medical and accident and product liability, and what I do is more on the civil side. We don't really do anything criminal. And then probably like in the 90s, when we had to learn if you wanted to progress, you had to write for the computer. Well, I didn't know how to do that because of the way I was taught. So I, through my state association, I got active in the real-time committee, and I learned how to write real-time, and I became the chairperson of the real-time committee, and then actually in 2008, I was the president of our state association. It's a great profession. You can work as little or as hard as you want, and it's very exciting.
49 years, I think that must be telling if you've stuck
Well,
with it that long.
everybody wants to know when I'm going to retire, and I'm not ready yet.
Aw.
I'm just not ready.
That's awesome. Rhonda?
I'm Rhonda Foster, and I am also a freelance court reporter. And I absolutely love it still, and I've been doing it 30 years. When I was in high school, I was really good in like spelling and English, and we didn't have computers back then. I did write shorthand, where you write on a pad of paper and you make little squiggly lines, and I was good at that. I was just really, those were my interests, and I loved to read and everything. So, and I didn't know anything about court reporting, but my dad knew a court reporter, and I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up either, and he just suggested, why don't you check it out? And I did, and went to court reporting school. Took me 3 years to get through, because I was also working full-time as a secretary at a bank downtown Detroit. So I got certified, I got married, I started having kids, and I was able to still raise my family with being a court reporter. You can pick your schedule. I still love it. I'm just excited to be here. And we can give you a demonstration. Cindy referenced the real time, and we can show you what real time means. It means as I'm writing it, it's on a screen, and it can be on that iPad also as I'm writing it. So that's what, if anybody would like to see that, that's what real time means. It's like, just like the closed captioning you see on TV. So.
Thank you. It's very interesting to listen. The majority of our panelists this evening didn't start out in the career they're in right now. They had some other thing that they thought they wanted to do or that they were interested in before they ventured down this different pathway. And that might be how your career path goes as well, where you might be exploring a couple things and then you say, no, maybe you know, this other thing is a little bit more interesting, and that's okay. That is a part of life, is that exploration and trying something, and then the importance, of course, of learning from some other people who can open you up to new ideas. So one of the big questions I always get from students is, well, what does the job look like? When we come to these panels, the kids always want to know, what does the job look like? So if we could just take a little bit of time to get into that, what does, now I know if it's anything like my job, no 2 days are necessarily the same, so I'm assuming yours aren't either. So what is that snapshot of what paint that picture is?
Well, I will tell you, as a prosecutors in my office, unlike other lawyers, and if you're thinking about the law, there's a whole spectrum of areas to practice, and it's the same kind of thing. You should experience it to know if you're suited towards a particular area or not. But if you want to be a prosecutor, you're going to be in court. And that's not true of every area of the law. There's some lawyers that don't see the inside of a courtroom for years at a time. They're going to go write wills or contracts or things like that. Prosecutors are generally trial attorneys, which means we are in trial a lot. And we work on cases from investigation, assisting with investigations, questions that come up. We will assist officers who are drafting search warrants, and we authorize search warrants before they actually go to a judge who decides whether or not it will be issued. So we play a role in the investigation and assisting in the investigation. We can't really do it directly because we can't become witnesses. And that's part of this job where you have to kind of draw a line and let the police do what they need to do to formulate a case, figure out what happened. Then they give it to us, and in my office on a typical day, I'm probably gonna go through some warrant requests. That's the way that the police agency submits to me an incident where they think someone should be charged criminally, and I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna look at the evidence, and I'm gonna look at the witnesses and decide if the case should be charged, and if so, what should be charged. And then we will, start the process through the court system if that's gonna be the case. And then on any given day, I will be handling some part or aspect of those cases. It could be the very beginning when someone is arraigned and told what their charges are, and a bond is decided whether or not they can be released pending a trial. We do preliminary hearings where we have to present proofs to justify holding someone for trial, all the way through the trial itself, sentencing, and then there's an appeal process. I think a lot of people think that the criminal justice system ends when a jury reads its verdict and they say, guilty, and that's great, but we're not done, because that defendant has an automatic right to appeal that, and that means it's going to be reviewed by the Court of Appeals here in Michigan, and we're gonna have to advocate on behalf of the case in that forum as well. So on a given day, I may be in court all day, I may be authorizing warrants, I may be answering motions. If a defendant's challenging some part of the case, they're usually gonna do that through a motion. So there is a lot of writing and research involved in that part of the job, but I think the most important part of the job is being able to think on your feet and respond and deal with the issues as they arise.
How about your job?
The probation officer has two main roles. Their first role is a pre-sentence investigator. So we're kind of near the end of the court case progression. So after they're found guilty or pled guilty, and before they get sentenced, in Michigan, all felony cases have to come to a probation department, and we conduct a pre-sentence investigation, do an interview with the offender. We review the police reports, the prosecutor's files, we talk to the victims, and we prepare a report for the judge, kind of touching on everything, a background report, and we make a recommendation to the judge so that they know where that person's, what their history is, we summarize the police report. Sometimes some of the police reports are hundreds of pages, literally. So we summarize it, condense it down for the court, because most cases plead guilty. So the judge hasn't seen a whole trial, hasn't seen the whole case come in. So we kind of give them a little more background on a lot of cases. And then once they're sentenced, if they get put on probation, the next role is my department would supervise someone on probation. So they come in and report to us, usually on a monthly basis, and we enforce the court order. They take drug tests, prove that they're working, prove that they are going to school. Oftentimes they have to do some kind of counseling program, maybe a community service component to that, and we basically enforce that court order. So that's probation in a nutshell.
God, I have to follow him, that's not
Yeah.
fair. It's essentially the same thing. What he did, though, is he gave you the book definition of what probation does. What I can tell you from doing every day to day is it's totally different. You don't know 1 minute whether you're going to have somebody come in who's upset about being there, who doesn't want to comply with the orders of the court. There might be another minute where you're going in court to testify or to read, do a verbal presentation of your report, take urines, review test results. We do all kinds of stuff. One of the biggest things that we do is communicate, though. We're communicating not only with the defendants who sit in front of us, but with attorneys, prosecutor, defense attorneys, judges. So it's exciting. There's nothing more exciting, in my view, in law enforcement than being a probation officer, because you have that dual role. You're upholding the order of the court, acting as a law enforcement officer, but you also have that opportunity to make a difference in somebody's life. Somebody that may not always have made the best decisions. And it's a tough thing to do. It's hard for us to have that dual role, to have both responsibilities. Priority number one, obviously, is enforcing the order of the court, but at times you have to be a salesperson and say to the person in front of you, look, I know that you have 12 terms of probation that you have to follow through, but let's start clicking one off at a time and work at it and you try not to destroy hope in them. Because the minute you destroy their hope, they're going to go the other way on you. And the idea of probation and law enforcement is to reduce recidivism or reduce them coming back through the system. So it used to be, when I first started 31 years ago, it was supervision by intimidation. That was what worked. We thought, the studies weren't out there, but now we're starting to see differences. And Todd and I both teach this in our corrections classes. You have to have that element of treatment, rehabilitation, and it's hard to do sometimes when you see somebody not putting forth the effort, but that's what makes it exciting for us.
I have to comment, we have a student intern that works with us here, and she was asking who was on our panel tonight, and I mentioned Mona, Todd, and Doug, and she said, oh yeah, I know them. I've heard them talk, and I was a little nervous, what do you do? And she said she's a student at SC4 going into criminal justice, so it made me feel a lot better, but it was just kind of nice to know that the way that you give back to the community as well, aside from your main jobs. So, Damon.
Day to day for me is just waiting around at our base, waiting for that call. Whether it's sitting there working on old reports, because we're all backed up on reports, going over crime scene photos for subpoenas, so you can go to court and get drilled by attorneys, doing a crime scene sketch, because a lot of the times they'll ask for a crime scene sketch and then not use it, but you have to make it anyways. So waiting for that radio to call you out, and then it's go process a scene. I mean, if it's a homicide, you're going to be there for a few hours, at least, depending on how big it is. If there's shell casing, if there's more than one location involved. I mean, it's really hard to describe my day-to-day because it depends on what that call is, And if you get a call, like if I'm off at 4 o'clock and I get that call at 3, oh no, now I'm off at 8. And there's nothing you can do about it. You get overtime pretty consistently with my career here. But other than working the crime scenes, you're going to go and you're going to talk to your detectives, kind of get an idea of what happened, so you can get an idea of where you want to start your investigation. And then once we've kind of processed everything, if it's a homicide, or a death of, or a suicide, we have to wait for the medical examiner's office to come and remove the body before we can leave. So, anything like that is going to be a lot longer scene. Doing something like a home invasion or B&E of a business, we're going to be there a lot shorter. We're going to take photos of any damage there is, and then we're going to take DNA swabs if there's anything that we think maybe get some kind of DNA, or if we see blood. Guys break into these buildings and then cut themselves on glass all the time. And barring anything like that, we're going to do our dusting for fingerprints. And then in any downtime we have with all that stuff while waiting for a call, our offices are attached to a garage that receives all the evidence vehicles in Detroit when they get picked up for evidence. So anytime there's downtime, we're in the garage processing cars from carjackings and things like that.
Before I tell you what our days are like, just a little background. There's several types of court reporters nowadays. When I first started, there was just the judicial court reporter who worked either, really not criminal, but in the civil arena. And I'm a freelancer. And then there's an official court reporter who works with a specific judge. And now we have captioning. So all the captioning that you see on television with live, like sports events and news and things like that, anything that's live, that's a court reporter that is doing the captioning. And then we have CART providers, which is communication-assisted real-time transcription. And what a CART court reporter does is they go with students either in high school or universities, college, whatever, that are either deaf or hard of hearing, and so that they'll provide something that they can see when they're going to school. So my day as a freelance court reporter is basically going to wherever I'm assigned where they need a verbatim transcript, and I would say probably 95% of that are depositions, and that's basically like a sworn statement, except that they call it a deposition because they can use it for trial. It's usually when there's a lawsuit that's been filed. And this is all the background work that the attorneys do to find out the facts of the case. And so if I'm not on a deposition, I'm at home, we work out of our homes, and I'm working on transcript. I travel all over, not as much now, more just in the Tri-County area, but whatever attorney's office I'm assigned to, that's what I do. So every day is different, times are different, subject matter is different. It's not a 9-to-5 job. Yesterday I had a 4 o'clock doctor's step that went till 6, so you can't say, geez, it's 5 o'clock, I have to go home. So that's what you have to do. So it's not, well, I don't consider it a job. It's been a part of my life for a long time.
Anything to add, Rhonda?
Pretty much the same. I mean, I travel all over. I've been to California, to Orlando, to Washington, D.C. I mean, you can get a lot of work out of the state. I've done conventions. Those were really exciting. But pretty much the same thing, and then come back and make a transcript. And that can be boring, but I still love it. I still love sitting at my computer and editing my transcript and making sure all the punctuation is proper and it's paragraphed and all the spellings are correct. I'm attention to detail. I like that part of it.
It's pretty interesting at dinner hearing you talk about from your years and years of experience in the courtroom to knowing when a young lawyer was in and you knew that it wasn't going to go so well because you need a little bit more experience to know what he should have been doing. Very interesting what you get being somebody who hears so much and gets to witness so much. You must be an excellent listener. So the next thing I wanted to ask is, what was I gonna say? Really, we have an audience full of young people really looking at what they might want to do. Could you pitch your position, your job to them? Whether it's you want to just explain what you love about it, but try and sell it as the best choice for them. Why should they do what you do?
Well, I'll tell you, I get asked the question all the time, how can you do what you do? Because one part of being in the criminal justice system, whether you're working as a police officer or prosecutor, probation, oftentimes when you're talking about the most serious types of crimes that can be committed, whether it's a murder case, a rape case, something involving children, those are the most horrific things that happen in humanity, really. And I would rather just not have to know about it, I think, if I'm an average person, and so I get asked that all the time, how can you stand it? How can you stand to deal with those types of cases every day? And my answer really is that it is hard, and there are days that are harder than others, but it is the most rewarding work when you are able to help someone that's in that situation, whether it's a family that's going through the worst possible situation that any family could go through, or a parent, or a victim who has experienced something that is, and for some people it may not seem so bad to have your house broken into. That doesn't sound so bad relating to the other things that can happen, but for someone whose sanctity of their home has been violated and they just don't feel safe there anymore, for that person, that case is the most important thing that's happening in their life. And they need to know that I'm giving it the attention that it deserves for that reason. So when you get through the process, and when I first meet victims at the beginning of a process, they want to know, they have a million questions, they want to know all the answers, and they're terrified about all the different things that can happen. And they're all terrified about being grilled on the stand by a lawyer, because they think it's like Judge Judy. They all think it's like Judge Judy. And so just sitting down and talking with a victim about taking it step by step, and then, we're only going to worry about our next step. We're not going to worry about everything that can happen after that, because there's too much that we won't even, can't even begin to guess about. And so to walk a victim through that process and get to the end where you have someone sentenced and they've been held accountable, and a victim, you know, you can't ever make them whole, really. But you can make them feel that the justice system heard them and held that person accountable and responsible. And that is very rewarding, because when they turn around and they thank you for getting them to that point, there's just nothing like it.
I think I should let Doug go first, since our jobs are so similar.
That's not fair.
Yeah.
I was
You're
dating.
gonna play off
Excuse
of
me.
me.
I was thinking we were on the dating game set. That's what I feel like when we're up here. So I wasn't paying attention, Todd. But I will go. To sell the job, Rachel, it's easy because the job sells itself. It's a great paying job. Probation officer job starts out at about $45,000 and tops out at about $55,000. Monday through Friday, holidays off, clean environment. And again, with law enforcement, you have the best of both worlds. You still have enforcement. We don't have the power of arrest. We can seek bench warrants. We can have people incarcerated or arrested. Now, that's a turn on. But if you're driving towards law enforcement and you want to enforce the law, this gives you that opportunity. But it gives you the second side of things in helping people. And as Mona mentioned, dealing with victims, we do also. But when you see a defendant or an offender make a transformation and become something they weren't before, no greater high. None at all.
I find the investigation part the most interesting. Meeting, I've met people from all walks of life as probationers. You might expect it's all one class of citizens, and there's maybe a majority of a similar group, but I literally have met doctors and lawyers as defendants and gotten to hear their stories, and I've worked on pre-sentence reports on cases that involved murder and rape and serious cases, so I've gotten to look at it from an outside, read it, talk to all parties involved. I really found that interesting. We get to go to court also, so you have that interaction. And then just to piggyback on what Doug said about having an offender turn their lives around. Just last summer, I was at a Little League game for my son in Fort Huron Township, and a gentleman walked up to me and said, "Mr. Armstrong, do you remember me?" I said, "Yeah," and I shook his hand, and his son was playing baseball there. He was a coach. He pointed over the concession stand, and he goes, "You remember my girlfriend so-and-so?" I said, "Yeah," and he goes, "That's my wife." And he walked over and introduced me to her and said, "You remember Mr. Armstrong? He used to come to the house when I was on probation." And I actually ran into him 2 more times over the baseball season. It was almost like running into a friend. And like Doug said, it was pride. And I don't know if there's anything I did particularly, but he turned his life around from dealing drugs to working a good job and being a productive member of the community. So it was really neat.
Very rewarding.
Yeah.
Damon, how about you?
I don't think I can sell my job. I'm totally serious. It's the kind of thing that you just have to love doing. I mean, she mentioned how hard it is to kind of talk to families, like on a rape case, for example. Well, I'm going and talking to them right after it happened, and I'm taking photographs as evidence. You know, that's hard to do. You have to love doing it, and some people just aren't cut out for it. When I got hired in, they hired 10 of us at the same time, and we've already lost 3 of them, and 1's on his way out. So it's not the kind of thing that anybody can just pick up and do. But it is very rewarding if you're able to do it. You know, kind of thinking that you're helping that person that lost their life, get their story out. I think the big part of it, the most memorable part I had was I had testified in court, and I was coming out of the courtroom, out of the little witness room on the side, at Frank Murphy Hall of Justice, and a family member caught me outside and thanked me for what I did. It's like I didn't do anything for her, I'm just helping out, solving a crime scene. Is almost all I'm saying. So the only way I look at it, I don't look at it as helping the family out necessarily, but if you're able to handle it, it's, I think, the most rewarding job I could do.
We're gonna let Roger go first.
Well, the pay is really good in the career. The average is about $50,000 starting, and I mean there are reporters that get up, into the 6 figures. they have to work really hard. I mean, it's an exciting career. You can go in so many different areas. I have been in St. Clair, and I wrote for a hearing impaired defendant, and that he was able to look at my iPad and be able to communicate with the attorneys and the judge by reading what was happening so that he could understand his case. I did the same thing down at Frank Murphy Hall of Justice for another hearing impaired. And it was so rewarding to me. I kind of wish that I had gone that route, but I've been doing what I've been doing for so long, it would be like to learn a whole new thing for me to do it on a regular basis. But when I went to that other, and he was a hearing impaired man, and I went back in a room with him so that he could communicate with his attorney, and being able to look at it, and he said, "I love this. Can I have this?" You know, it was just really rewarding to me that I was able to help him to be able to participate and understand what was happening with his own case. And then, you know, the everyday, you know, sometimes you think auto accidents, slip and fall, but I mean, we see people that are really, really injured, and they really do. I mean, I understand why people bring these lawsuits. It's not just that people are greedy. I mean, people are truly hurt. So, I mean, to me, that's helping people in the justice system. So
it sounds like a key component is really caring about people, even when maybe the people aren't the easiest or the situation isn't the easiest, but you do truly care. I'm wondering too, for students really trying to align their interests, their skills with a career, what you might give as suggestions if you're interested in this, or if you are good at this, this might be a good position for you. Do any of you have, we can rip down the line again, or if you want to jump in with skills and interests that you see aligning with what you do? So the people in our audience can start going, okay, is this not me?
Well, I think initially in law enforcement, you have to have that upholding the law, that attitude, that respect of authority. But the key component, I think, is communication. You have to have the desire and the ability, and not be afraid to speak, to write, to do those kind of things. I wasn't the best student. I don't tell my son this, but my grades weren't absolutely perfect. So I never felt that the pressure in probation or in law enforcement, and even when I hire a person now, I don't necessarily look at the grade point average to get them in. I'm more interested in the personality and somebody that can speak and write and communicate. So I don't know if that answered fully what you were looking for. Communication ability, integrity, honesty. You're representing the court. Todd works for the executive branch, where I work for the judicial branch. So it's a little bit different from district to circuit court. But I represent the court and have to carry out that image that I'm part of the court, and it's very important. So integrity and honesty is huge.
Anybody else have a skill or interest that you might want to throw out there that might align, that students might want to see themselves doing?
Do you have a good attention to detail? Obviously, in the type of job that I do, it's going to be very important. You have to really be able to keep your eye out for certain things. We have tools. I got a metal detector to look for shell casings and things like that, but it's not always completely accurate, you know. And when you're out on a scene at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're trying to see, where all the bullet holes went inside of a house, that's attention to detail is pretty important. Or you can miss something. I had a scene not that long ago where the guy had kicked in the door, and then the homeowner defended herself and ended up shooting him. Well, we were kind of going over the scene and stuff, and eventually we were able to get a very faint shoe impression on the door that didn't match his shoe. And that was something we almost missed. So that goes to show us, okay, he had a partner with him that got away. So it's that kind of thing you need to really keep your eye out for. So if you had a good attention to detail, and if you have a strong stomach, that helps. A lot of the places I go crawling around in aren't, they're not somewhere you want to go. We had a breakout of bed bugs at the Detroit Public Safety Headquarters last year, because somebody brought evidence back that had bed bugs on it, and that's the
Glad
kind
you
of
said
environment
last
you're
year,
going
not
into.
today.
No, I'm not stationary there. And when they told us that, I stayed away for a good month. But, yeah, it's, again, it's this, being able to stomach that kind of thing. It's not something you can just learn in school. You have to be able to just do it. For fun.
Any other skills you might think of, or interests that students might pique their interest?
Well, for court reporting, I think it's communication skills and you do have to, when you're writing your deposition or whatever it is, you do have to be focused on that too. You can't be, thinking about a lot of other things. Good grammar and an understanding of, believe it or not, punctuation, and although people don't always speak perfect English, you'll learn how you have to punctuate and things like that, but good attention.
Anything else? So it's been interesting tonight hearing some Judge Judy comments, and even before we got started, how some of the television shows, like the CSI type of shows, put certain ideas in people's minds that may or may not be reality. Considering that, or anything else, if you want to set the record straight, or if there's something you think students just need to know, and I'm not asking the right questions, what does our audience need to know about your career, or how you got there, or any of the above? So,
Well, I can say about my career, to piggyback on the last question, advocacy is a huge part of it. But unlike other lawyers, private lawyers are hired by the person who pays them, and they want the best outcome for that person. And so they want to win. And that's not my goal. Where a private attorney's ethical responsibility is to zealously represent their client, my responsibility is to seek justice. So if I think that we've brought a case against someone that it turns out may not have committed the crime, I have to dismiss it. It's not a situation where but that's gonna be, I don't even keep track, there's how many wins, losses. You'll hear some lawyers say, well, I have a 94% conviction rate. They're lying to you if they tell you that. Because really, it doesn't matter. It's not about how many you win or if you lose any. Really what I need to know is that I've done the absolute best job I possibly can to represent what happened. And so on the flip side of that is, when it comes down to, where the rubber meets the road for me is a trial. And at the end of the day, if I've charged someone and they're not accepting responsibility for it and they want to exercise their constitutional right to a trial, then it's my job to prove that crime to a jury. And so when I'm trying a case, I don't care about anybody else in the room. I'm really not, even the judge. I have to be respectful of the judge and do things the way the judge wants me to do them. But really, my focus is on that jury and hoping that they understand. And they come into the courtroom with a lot of misperceptions about how the law works, what the law is, what they should expect about evidence. Jurors think if you touch anything, you'll leave fingerprints and DNA, and that they'll be able to find it just by looking. So I actually have a question I ask jurors when we're during a trial. The very first part is jury selection. We get to talk to jurors and ask questions. And one of the questions I'll ask is how many jurors watch CSI or something like it. And my standard question is to ask them if they would be surprised to hear that CSI, this question's getting kind of old because this was about 10 years ago, but that CSI won the Saturn Award, which is an entertainment industry award for best science fiction back in 2004, and it tied with Buffy the Vampire Slayer to get that award. CSI is really riveting, but that's not how it works. There's not a magic machine in the corner that will tell us before the next commercial break, what kind of ink this was and where the, DNA came from. Crime scene experts are out there doing the absolute best they can, and all evidence can tell you is what it tells you. And whether it's that type of misperception or something else, again, jurors have ideas about what they want to see or know. I think they think sometimes that a trial will answer every question. And it'll be like the end of a TV show where you know, usually how those shows end is they show you exactly how the crime happened. You know, that's the last clip. And we're not going to be able to necessarily answer every question, but I can prove to you that that person did what I charged them with. And that's the focus. So, but you have to be able to communicate well in a way that people understand. Police officers, we train them because they use words like vehicles and, you know, surveillance as opposed to I watched the car. You know, jurors don't necessarily, they're not used to hearing people talk in the terms that, you know, we get used to talking in law enforcement. So just making it, not that we're trying to dumb it down, but we also have to make it easily understandable.
I think you have to really want to work with people. And people of all walks, people with vastly different backgrounds than yours, people with vastly different value systems than you may have. And you have to want to try to work with them and help them. Not judge them, not put them down. To do anything in our job, you have to try to help them. I think that's probably the most important aspect for my field, for probation, or corrections.
Perseverance, you are going to have the door shut on you several times, and the more you can make yourself known, job shadow, come in, speak to people, introduce yourself to everybody you meet, don't be shy, put the phone away for a while. I know that's a big point with us, and you think it's a generational thing, but it does affect your marketability when you know how to communicate and talking to people and smiling and shaking hands and saying hi first. All that stuff is really good, and that's what we look for. Take a job wherever you can get it. Get your foot in the door. As Todd said, he was a corrections officer, and now he's all the way to the top in the supervision role. So it's getting in. We're more likely to hire somebody that we know is already part of the organization than somebody off the streets.
As she mentioned earlier, CSI is not true. I don't get to carry a gun. I don't chase bad guys. I just go and process crime scenes. We do have some tools that we use. I've got, metal detector we use. We have to take measurements at crime scenes. We can use luminol and blue star to search for blood if we think there may be blood that was cleaned up. But other than that, we're not doing this big scientific investigation at every crime scene. Forensic science is kind of slow. I mean, if you get fingerprints, it could take a week to get results back. DNA is a month minimum, unless it's a high-profile case and they try to fast-track it. But kind of stuff, it takes a long time to go through. And even entering into the system, they don't pop up one result. It'll pop up, if you put a fingerprint into the identification system, you'll get maybe 30 results, and then an analyst has to go through and make a determination from that. So things like Law and Order, where there's one forensic scientist that does all of it, no, you got crime scene, who's a career, or then fingerprints, DNA, like people work in specific sections of a laboratory. That's kind of a thing that I think a lot of people don't get. And I think you were kind of touching on the CSI effect, which is something that I was surprised we had to deal with, where we've had cases get dismissed or defendants go free when they probably really shouldn't have, because the jury thought we didn't have enough evidence. They thought we should have had DNA and we didn't, so they thought, well, he must not have done it. So that's something we have to explain to juries. Well, not me, as somebody like her would explain to it, or the judge, but it's something we have to deal with because people expect more than what we actually have.
I would liken a court reporter like the fly on the wall. I mean, we're kind of the silent person when we're actually doing our job. And when I first started court reporting, I was such a shy person. But over the years, I've developed my personality, a better speaking personality, and can interact with the attorneys and even some of the witnesses. And at the end of the day, my pride is the product that I put out. Sometimes we take doctors, or several years ago, I took an immunologist, a doctor. I had not a clue at all of what he was talking about. But I did a lot of research on the internet, and I found every disease that he mentioned. And so at the end of the day, I was very proud of the transcript that I gave the attorneys. And I don't know whether they appreciate it or not, but it meant a lot to me, so.
Yeah, I was also very shy when I first started my career, and it was perfect for me because I could just sit at the end of the table and just write, and I didn't really have to interact too much. Now today, I'm not that totally shy like that, and I can interact, but I get a lot of pride also out of the transcripts that I produce, because I know that I work very hard to get every single word, and I had an Orkin case, and it had so many names of pesticides and all kinds of things, and it took me forever to find spellings and stuff. And thank God for Google. I mean, back in the day when we first started, I mean, we had to get dictionaries and encyclopedias, and we would save our, every phone book, and, to find any types of names, but today you can just kind of Google, and you can, if you can get close to a spelling, you can usually find what you're looking for, because you want it right in that transcript.
So at this point, I'm thinking we have a good peek into each of our panelists, but now you've probably had some opportunity to start developing your own questions and think, what would you like to ask, whether it's everybody on this panel or an individual, a question about what he or she does. What kinds of questions are out there? Do you have any questions to ask your own?
So for the transcriptionist reporting, most of you said you're doing freelance. So is there like a company that, I'm thinking of like a temp service or something, like is there somewhere where you go that people can find you, that they contract you for either a long or short period of time? Is that how that system works, or?
Basically, we're independent contractors, and we're both affiliated with Hanson Renaissance Court Reporting. And both of us have our own clients, so when they call in the office knows that I'm to go on that job, or same thing with Rhonda, or there are just firm clients, or we work with out-of-town attorneys, and they call the office, and then we're assigned to the particular job. Or there are some court reporters that are on their own, or they have very, very small firms. But nowadays, because of all the technology, there's so many things that we need to offer, and it can be very expensive. So if you're affiliated with a larger firm, they're able more to afford all that technology than a smaller firm would. So.
And with the larger firm also, I find it's easier for me to set my schedule, so I don't have to, like, if I have all my own clients, and so I have to be available this day, this day, this day, this day, but I really like later here in my career that I'm able to say, I'm only going out 3 days a week. I'm tired of this driving all over the place, because I live out here, but I drive to Oakland County most of the time. So I'm an hour and a half I have to give myself to get to a job, and I'm tired of that. I'd rather take a couple of jobs 2 or 3 days a week. I can take 2 jobs in one day a lot of times, and I'm still working full time, and then I can have 2 days at home where I can transcribe.
Sounds flexible. Another question, Becca?
Yeah, I have a question for Damon. So we were talking a little bit about this before, but I've heard from a lot of students who said they might want to go into like crime scene investigation work, and I'm wondering if you have any advice for them, going into that field in terms of what kinds of things should they study? Are they students who should be really interested in science, or you know, should you get a criminal justice major, or is there a specific credential that looks really good if you're wanting to work for a police department and do that job?
I think it's going to depend on the police department. When they hired me, and like I said before, when they hired 10 of us, we came from a bunch of different backgrounds. One majored in biology, 3 of us were in forensics, one was just criminal justice, one of the older women had an anthropology degree, so it's kind of from all over the place, but they really want a certain number, I don't remember what it is in Detroit, but they want so many credit hours in chemistry and biology, and as long as you got that and a degree and an interest in it, you can get in. As far as any other agencies, I'm not sure what they do. The Michigan State Police don't have their own crime scene team. They send out their crime lab technicians to process crime scenes, so at that point you're going to need at least a bachelor's like what I've got to get into the laboratory. A lot of places, Detroit is changing. It's becoming more of a civilian unit as far as what I do, but a lot of places will send out scout officers. You can move on to the crime scene team as an officer if you want to be a police officer first and kind of move over to the scene team at that. If you want to do it on a federal level, anybody in the FBI can be a crime scene investigator. A lot of the time it's their agents, but you can work in the office doing a computer job and apply to be on their scene team, and whenever a scene comes in, you go. So I mean, you can come from any background at that point if you work for the FBI.
So it's, if you're going to the FBI, biology and chemistry wouldn't be a requirement?
Not necessarily, because you can go in from like their office positions. Anybody can be on the crime scene team because they don't have a full-time team except for the supervisor of it. Everybody else just has their normal jobs that they do, and when a scene comes in, they just call them together to go out. So at that point, you can have really any background. I mean, it might help if you have that kind of background to get onto it, but if you're in the FBI, I'd assume it's not too difficult to get on. So.
Any other questions?
I know earlier you had talked about job shadowing, and I was just wondering if there were any specific programs in any of your fields of work, or how exactly would job shadowing work for us to apply?
Well, in my office, we typically take interns that are law students. So between first, second, and second, third year of law school, because actually in Michigan, when you've had at least a year of law school, you can practice under the supervision of another attorney. So, and that's true whether, like I said, if you decide you want to go into contract law, you could actually, if they were willing to let you go in there, go into a courtroom with the supervision of an attorney and start putting things on the record in court. I did that right after my first year of law school in the Macomb County Prosecutor's Office. So to actually do things hands-on, we are kind of focused on law students. We do periodically have other college kids, or I don't think any high school kids that I can recall, but that come in and help in the office with, you know, some other things that might be needed. But I'm trying to think of other areas. There's a cadet program at the Port Huron Police Department. So that provides a great insight into law enforcement from their perspective, and I know that they hire, it's not uncommon, let me put it this way, for them to hire cadets. Because as Doug said, if we see how you work, what your work ethic is like, and we kind of form a relationship with you and know what your, you know, abilities are, then I think you've got a much better chance, so.
As for students who are in high school, you take juries on Tuesdays
Right.
often, and
Right.
I think, you know, the court buzzards or the court
Watch.
watchers, or whatever you want to call them, you know, but there's a ton of information to gather and to see if you would like the pace and the you know.
That's true, and I mean, in terms of the courtroom itself, courtrooms are public. They can be closed every once in a while when there's a particular type of sensitive case being handled, but for the most part, they're open and they're public. And we do get some court watchers who come in, and, you know, when I was a younger prosecutor, we had some regulars that would tell me, you know, I didn't believe a word they said, Mona, you know, and then I'm like, okay, I know I got a problem if they don't believe, you know, so, but you can come in and a lot of, I think civics classes and some of the college classes will require students to come in and maybe take notes on what's happening. So, like Jean said, if you have the opportunity to see it firsthand, watch a jury getting picked. It is a long, drawn-out process. I wish it was more interesting for the people involved in it. But and I'll have friends call and say, my daughter wants to come see what court's like, and they can, they can come in on Monday and see, on a Monday, a typical Monday afternoon in the circuit court, our 3 circuit judges are usually doing arraignments, sentencings, motions. And so if you sit there and watch sentencings, they may have 6 to 8 sentencings to do. Most of those are gonna involve some form of substance abuse that led up to whatever crime we're talking about. So you start to see those patterns, and you maybe see some of the input that others had into the point that we're actually doing the sentencing.
Yeah, and there's really no better showcase to watch her in action in the courtroom. Being in the system for as long as I have, I still enjoy going to the courtroom and watching. But if you express an interest in probation and say, hey, I really liked what you talked about, what you have to offer, can I come and watch you for a day? We accept that all the time. Contact District Court Probation. I can leave a number with you afterwards, and if you want to come sit in on one of our probation interviews and kind of watch our day-to-day, absolutely.
We take interns all the time on our crime scenes. Detroit has a specific program they go through where you'll rotate through different units, like you'll go and intern at sex crimes and a homicide detective unit and then come to us and things like that. But we also take people that contact us on ride-alongs where they just come hang out with us for a day and see the stuff we do. And with interns, if you want to measure for me, okay, take the wheel and measure out the scene, or if you want to take the crime scene photos, we let you do it. I mean, I'll be over your shoulder. I'm going to look at your pictures and make sure they're good. Might have to delete one and retake it, but with us, you can do a fair amount of hands-on with us.
What is that age requirement
For what I do,
Yeah.
there isn't one. The youngest guy that got hired with me was 21. So as long as you have the background they want and you're interested in it, then you can get in pretty young, I would think. Because with my position, I only needed an associate's degree. I mean, I have a bachelor's, but an associate's was all they really wanted. And there was writing in our union book where you can get hired and finish your degree after you've already been there. You just have so much time to do it. So you can be there for, I think it was up to 4 years. And at the end of that 4 years, you have to have your degree or they'll move you somewhere else. But it's not really any kind of restriction beyond that.
Is there a minimum age for students who are interested in observing or taking pictures?
No, we had, I think the last interns, one of them was like 20. And then once she left us, she ended up getting, going out to, I think, Las Vegas and doing it out there as well. But there's not really any kind of age requirement. As long as you're interested in it, you can do it. We had one girl take some bad advice from a homicide detective. And before they went to the crime scene, she put Vicks Vapor Rub on. And because he told her it would help with the scene, and it didn't. Like, she had to walk away. So it's one of those things where she thought she could handle it.
And I would say our local departments, I know the Port Huron Police Department will allow ride-alongs as well. I'm not sure if there's an age requirement. I'm thinking there might be. I know that they've had a community police academy where anyone, I think, of any age can come in and they get a general background of the job that they do and how they do it. So I highly recommend it. I did a ride-along when I was a new prosecutor. I did a couple of them. And I learned that I could not be a police officer. And it takes, I thought, I watched a drunk driving stop and an arrest, and I thought, the hardest part would be that this guy's gonna argue with him and fight with him or whatever. And he didn't, for 45 minutes while the officer was doing the paperwork, finishing what he needed to do and driving him into the department. He's just whining the whole time. Like, he was just complaining. Man, can't you let me go? I'm going to lose my job. Just going on and on and on. And that's when I realized I couldn't be a police officer, because I can't listen to people whine all the time. I think I might have been able to handle the other stuff, but not that. So.
If you want to be a probation officer, you have to listen to people. Sometimes your coworkers.
So sounds like there are opportunities for students who are interested to start getting out there and really get a feel for whether or not this is really a fit for them. If they have to listen to the whining, if maybe the courtroom is boring after all, or whatever it is, going ahead and taking advantage of some of these opportunities will let you know if you're going down the track that you're really interested in, but it's also as important to figure out if it's not interesting, so you're not wasting your time dwelling on the same ideas, and you can move on with maybe something else would be a good fit. Any other questions?
So you kind of surprised me actually with the probation officers, because I did not realize that they were involved kind of in the front end of that, in doing and helping to help the judge, you know, come up with a plan for, you know, a plan of action and stuff for that. So is there a difference then between the person that they would report to after their sentence is done? Or is it pretty much the same, and then you can kind of decide where you'd like to work possible?
You know,
Or?
in our county, the size of our county, my staff all do both roles. And most people stay with the same person who did the investigation. You go down to Macomb County or Wayne County, much larger systems, they have specialized teams that just do the investigative part or just work in the courtroom. And then you come out and get assigned to a supervision agent. So it really depends where you're at. And once in a while we have personality conflicts. We might have to move someone. We have specialized caseloads for sex offenders, someone on electronic monitoring, so you might get moved to a different probation officer that deals with that specialty.
And most often it's a criminal justice degree that you
Yeah,
receive?
to work in my department, you have to have a bachelor's degree. Pretty much any probation office, district court, juvenile court, circuit court, you have to have a bachelor's degree. My department has some guidelines. They're all available on the Department of Corrections website.
All in criminal justice, though?
No,
correct?
basically any social science degree. It's a pretty wide range of degrees. Several people in my office were social workers before. Some were corrections officers. Masters in public administration, I have one staff member with, so pretty wide variety of degrees. You'd be surprised what they'll accept. In fact, my department a couple years ago changed it so any bachelor's degree plus 1 year's experience in the prison as a guard, you can become a probation officer. So,
And that's really what we look for in district court, is a bachelor's degree in any social field such as that. But to go along with what Todd said, and that was a really good question, you know, do we specialize? And we've had that presented to us. We've tried that option. The problem with specializing is it's a high burnout rate. I mean, we're dealing with, on any given day, caseloads of about 150. So when you're doing the pre-sentence investigation, that's your opportunity to build up rapport with your client. And if you hand them off to somebody else, or if you didn't have that initial meeting with them on a report day, which is what we call our days when our probationers come and see us, you're seeing between 35 and 50 people. So you don't have a half hour to spend with somebody. You know, it's a quick in, quick out kind of thing. So specialization is tough. And like Todd mentioned, there are courts that do that. But I like the idea of being well-rounded.
I have a question for Ms. Armstrong. So I'm involved with mock trial, and it's made me want to become a lawyer. Do you think that it is similar to what you do every day, or is it really different?
Is mock trials?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I remember you from mock trial, actually. For those who may not be familiar, St. Clair County mock trial program runs through a lot of the high schools, and there's teams that come out of the high schools and compete in February. Actually, my daughter's involved in it too. So, and it provides a phenomenal opportunity to at least experience what it's like to have to research a case, know what witnesses are going to say, or anticipate what witnesses are going to say, and then present your case through your team. Opening, closing, and the witness testimony, and dealing with exhibits, and how to technically, I can't just pick up the fingerprint that Damon might have collected and just give it to the jury. I mean, there's a whole process we have to go through, so. And I think I might forget about mock trial because I didn't have the opportunity to do anything like that when I was in high school. But anything like that fosters those abilities to do public speaking is going to be a great experience. And then mock trial itself, it's not exactly the way a courtroom really goes. We don't have time limits. Well, we do have some time limits that some of the judges impose, but for the most part, it's not like it is for mock trial. But if you like that, then that's a pretty good indicator of whether or not you would like, you know, to at least explore further the idea of being a trial attorney.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question for Todd. You mentioned that there were social workers that would turn in like the probation officer. Is there like a major difference between a social worker and a probation officer?
No. And yes, we can request warrants and have people arrested. But a big part of our job is social work. It's trying to link that person with services in the community, whether it be substance abuse treatment, education programs, employment. So there's a lot of similarities, a lot of crossover. We've seen quite a bit of crossover, especially at the state level, because the social workers for the state of Michigan are a department that can transfer into our department. So I've had, I think, at least one in my current office, and when I worked in Detroit, several that transferred between social services and corrections. So very closely related, actually.
So what would the typical responsibilities of a juvenile probation officer be? Because it's a little bit different than what you both did, correct?
Yeah, it's a huge difference. In juvenile, you're not only dealing with the offender, but also the family. And that's what was kind of a difficult proposition to me, because you can correct a juvenile's behavior when they're with you and when they're in your system, but then you have to send them back home. And a lot of times, there's not willingness at home to have the parents involved. So that's really the main difference.
So when they're a juvenile, isn't there any rules that the family must also comply with certain things to?
There are. Usually the juvenile system is totally different than the adult criminal justice system. Once a person has been, they're not found guilty, they are found responsible. So juveniles are found responsible for criminal offenses. Then they typically are placed on juvenile probation. They have to sign a behavior contract. They have to, same kind of rules in the sense that they have to be in school. They have to abide by the rules of their parents. They have to do all of those things. The parents are responsible for a lot of costs and also for enforcing the behavior contract. And if they don't, they can be held in contempt. It is, I think Doug at one point said probation's gotten away from the intimidation side of things. It's still there. There's still,
Or softer.
It's that whole lead a horse to water thing, whether it's adult probation or juvenile probation. We make all those resources available. I can't tell you how many times I've had people say that they're, maybe they have been a victim, but it's their loved one who's the defendant and they don't want them to go to prison or whatever, they just want them to get help. And I tell them, I can get them help, but if they don't take it, there's nothing I can do about that. I can't make somebody. And it's the same thing if you don't have the parents that are invested and willing, so the court does try and use a hammer to get them to cooperate with it, but unfortunately, you're already kind of 1 foot in the hole if you don't have that.
In the crime scene investigation, does St. Clair County have a division here, or do we have, if something needs to be called in, do we have to call from a higher department?
I'm not positive, but I was under the impression that St. Clair would call Michigan State Police.
Yeah, we do. We call Michigan State Police. Well, I shouldn't say that. Some of our police officers have training on evidence collection. So in terms of, like Damon mentioned, you have somebody break into a house, they leave blood on the window that's broken. Usually our officers are trained to collect that, to collect fingerprints, that kind of thing. So there's kind of a first tier level of training and experience that our police officers can have. But then when you get into, typically a homicide scene, something like that, we will call in the Michigan State Police and they'll dispatch a crime scene unit that is made up of their lab technicians.
Yeah,
So-
the state police has a few different labs across the state that they kind of dispatch to depending on where it is. As far as individual areas that have their own scene teams, the only ones I'm totally aware of, I know obviously Detroit has one, I know Grand Rapids has their own team, and out west, Wyoming, Michigan has their own team. I'm sure there's probably a couple more nearby that I've just never seen.
Ours usually comes out of Sterling Heights.
Well, yeah, with the Michigan State Police though, yeah.
Out of where?
Sterling Heights.
Yeah, they got a lab in Sterling Heights, they have one in Metro Detroit, Northville has a lab, forgetting a few, I'm sure.
We had one come from, the Sterling Heights lab was tied up, the Northville lab was tied up, and we had one come from, someplace in the northern part of it.
I think they have one in, I think they have one in
Bridgeport, right, exactly.
Yeah, Bridgeport has one.
So, and I can tell you, I think every time they come out, it's either 105 degrees or 20 below. I've never been in a homicide scene where it wasn't.
It's never good conditions for them.
Well, I guess one last question, unless somebody else has something to chime in with. But what piece of advice would you give to everybody as they leave tonight and they're going forward with their next steps and exploring what they want to do? What would you offer?
I feel like there's 100 things to say and then 2 things to say. I mean, I think actually, it's not so much advice, it's an observation, because you're here, and that's huge. The fact that you're invested enough into your future and your interests, your goals, that says a lot about you, and just to stay focused on that. I mean, I went to, when I think about it in law school, when I came out of law school, we got together the next year or two. A bunch of my friends that had gone into civil law hated it. I was shocked by how many people that I graduated law school with that didn't like their jobs in the first couple of years that they were working there. And I loved my job. I mean, I loved everything about my job. And so it's just so sad to invest that much time, effort, money to get into a field that it turns out you don't really like that much. And so what you're doing right now is so critical. And maybe you leave here tonight and you go, I don't want to do any of those things. None of that sounded interesting to me. That's fine. As long as you find your path and like I said, take every opportunity you have to talk to people who do that work, shadow people who do that work, not on TV, but see how it is in real life. And then what you decide that is right for you is going to become very apparent. Because I think it's really sad how many people go to a job every day that they just don't like. And you don't want to be that person. So, but I actually think I want to congratulate you for being here, just even looking into everything that you can to the degree that you are.
Good point. Even if you're eliminating something right now, you have made one more step toward really knowing what you want to do. Todd?
I'm going to do a shameless plug for the community college in Ferris. All of the classes locally here in St. Clair County are taught by people that worked in the field. They're not taught by professors that haven't done this job. The head guy at the community college is retired from Port Huron Police Department. Doug and I teach there. Mona's taught there. Other people in her office is taught there. Police officers. You will get to hear real stories and meet real people. Take some of those intro classes and see if it's something you like.
And I had added, as we wrapped up, just a little bit of information. I just pulled off of the SC4 website because they do have a criminal justice program in a couple of different ways to get into that. And of course, you're meeting people who are executing that program. But you can go into the criminal justice program. They have a corrections associate's degree, law enforcement associate degree, so a 2-year degree, and you can start getting right in there. But then you can also do an on-campus transfer to Fair State for the Bachelor of Science and even the Master of Science, and you're involved in those programs.
Yes.
So right here, you don't even have to go far to get a degree and even a master's degree in criminal justice. So with great people, obviously, as your teachers.
I can't tell you anything better than what Mona and Todd told you about what to do. What I can do is give you one tip of what not to do, and that's social media. Social media will come back and bite you, because when you apply for a job in law enforcement corrections, we're going to investigate your background, and we're going to see what you post and see what's on there. So don't make it public. Don't make it out there. We're going to dig into it. You know, it's okay to have fun. I'm not a fun governor, and even though my son will tell you otherwise, but don't publish it. When it gets out there, it's out there forever.
As far as forensics in general or crime scene, networking is a big deal. Like I said, there's only a couple different agencies that have an exclusive crime scene team. In Detroit, with how busy you can imagine my unit is, we've got 18 people working there. And you can't get in until somebody leaves. So knowing people that already do the job is a big way to get in. Even the laboratories of Michigan State Police, if you want to get a further education and try to work in the lab that way and be on their crime scene team, I think Northville has the same thing, about 20 people working there. So it's not easy to get into if you're not willing to work for it. It took me about 2 years after I graduated to get into Detroit. But I was also not willing to leave the state. I mean, there's jobs all over the country if you want to move, but if you want to stay in Michigan, it's a little bit difficult to get into if you're not patient. So getting to know people that are already in there that can maybe help you out it'll go a long way.
I just, for court reporting, not to knock college, but you don't have to have an associate's, a bachelor's, a master's degree. You actually go to court reporting classes. And Rhonda can tell you a little bit more because she teaches over at Macomb Community College. But there is a program out right now that's called A to Z, and it is a free program. And it's an introduction to court reporting. It lasts, 8 weeks?
8 weeks.
Yeah.
And there's a flyer in your packets for one that we're trying to get enough students together to have one. So if you're interested, email one of those people on that.
So this is a great career that you could be very successful and don't have to have a college degree.
And also in those packets is a flyer for it's just a 2-hour seminar in July, I believe, just to come and hear more about court reporting. But yeah, Macomb Community College has a full NCRA approved court reporting program, and that's where I'm teaching in that program.